Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 698 for May 17th, 2018. Coming up in a few minutes.
We now see visitors from literally, every corner of the earth. Many more visitors from South America than we used to see, and of course, a huge number of visitors now from China, which is a market that's developed just in recent years.
When the Scotch Whisky Experience opened in 1988 at the top of Edinburgh's Royal Mile, tourism was barely a blip on the whiskey industry's radar, and only a handful of distilleries were open to tourists. 30 years later, Scotch whisky is booming, and with no distilleries open quite yet in the heart of Edinburgh, the Scotch Whisky Experience has become a key stop for whiskey lovers visiting the Scottish capital. We'll chat with Julie Trevisan Hunter of the Scotch Whisky Experience on WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's coming up later, along with the calendar of events, your voice, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and on Behind the Label, we'll explain the age-old dilemma, ice or no ice in your whiskey. That's all just ahead on this edition of WhiskyCast.
This is whiskey, Johnnie Walker's Scotch whisky, from this place and these people, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnnie Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot-still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. Last time around, we answered a listener's question about rumors that Suntory would be discontinuing its Yamazaki 12-year-old single malt. Those rumors are false, but unfortunately, that is not the case for two of Suntory's other whiskeys. The company has confirmed that it will be discontinuing the Hakushu 12-year-old single malt and the Hibiki 17-year-old blend in September because of ongoing supply shortages. Not only is Japanese whiskey demand exploding globally, but demand at home has doubled over the last 10 years. Suntory has been expanding production capacity at its Yamazaki, Hakushu, and Chita distilleries, along with building new maturation warehouses in an attempt to catch up with demand. This is the first time Suntory has discontinued whiskeys with age statements because of supply issues. The other major player in Japanese whiskeys, Nikka, replaced all of its age statement expressions during 2015 and 2016 with no age statement versions for the same reason. Several months ago, we reported that Diageo was looking at plans for a visitor experience at the new Bulleit Distillery in Shelbyville, Kentucky. That distillery opened about a year ago and was built without tourists in mind. Monday, there was a groundbreaking ceremony for what will be a $10 million visitors center expected to open next year. Back in 2014, Diageo opened the Bulleit Frontier Whisky Experience at the Stitzel-Weller Distillery on Louisville's west side. Once the Bulleit Visitors Center opens, the Stitzel-Weller Experience will transition to focusing on Diageo's other American whiskey brands, including Orphan Barrel, Blade & Bow, and I.W. Harper. Let's stay in bourbon country for just a minute. Back in episode 674, around New Year's, we heard from Buddy Thompson about his personal stash of 45-year-old James Thompson and Brother Final Reserve bourbon. That whiskey went on sale at Louisville's Fraser History Museum to benefit both the museum and veterans charities, and sold out immediately. But they told us at the time that more Final Reserve whiskey would be released later this year. And we have the details now. Next week, those people who bought the 45-year-old edition will get the first chance to buy one bottle each of the second and third batches. And the Fraser's Andy Trinan says anything that's left will go on sale to the public June 5th.
There will be a 44-year, which is the second batch, There will be a 42-year, which is the third batch, and then there may be that 42-year may stay in the barrel for a while longer, and there may ultimately be a fourth batch, but it will also be a 42-year expression.
Is this only available to those who bought the first one earlier this year?
It is going to be made available to those buyers first. So they will have the option to buy, and we anticipate there will be some inventory left afterwards, but we, to be completely honest with you, don't know exactly how much, because there's not a lot of it. The 44-year, actually there's less of that than there was of the 45-year.
So the Fraser is really starting to get into this really seriously with bourbon, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are, as you know, we've been designated the official starting point of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. Here in August of 2018, we're opening the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Welcome Center and the Spirit of Kentucky exhibition, which is about the culture, the craft, the category of bourbon history. And we're kind of going to become a repository for all of these bourbon stories. All the brands tell them brilliantly. They tell their individual stories and they tell their brand stories. But we will tell all of those stories and have, primary source information in the Spirit of Kentucky exhibition on this great industry for the state of Kentucky, which produces 95% of the bourbon in the world.
The price will be $2,000 each plus tax for the 44-year-old Final Reserve, while the 42-year-old will sell for $1,800 each. Once again, all profits from both bottles will be going to veterans charities. Meanwhile, Jim Beam is coming out with a cask-strength version of Knob Creek Rye Whiskey. It's 9 years old and bottled at 59.6% ABV. It took Best Rye Whiskey honors in the recent San Francisco World Spirits competition. It'll be available starting next month for around $70 a bottle. We have other winners to report from the San Francisco World Spirits competition. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society took the Best in Show honors for all whiskeys with an 18-year-old Lafroig single cask bottling, specifically bottle number 29.224. Bulleit Barrel Strength was named the Best Straight Bourbon, while Heaven Hill took Best Small Batch Bourbon for Elijah Craig Small Batch and the Best Single Barrel Bourbon for Henry McKenna Single Barrel. Crown Royal 13-year-old Blender's Mash was named the Best Canadian Whiskey. Dewar's 25 took Best Blended Scotch 16 years and older, while Cutty Sark Prohibition was named the Best Blended Scotch with no age statement. Talisker 10, Highland Park's The Dark 17-year-old, Glencadam 25, and Ardbeg Corrie Vrecken won the single malt Scotch categories, while the Tyrconnell 10-year-old Madeira finish won the Best Irish single malt, and Cavalan's King Car Conductor Taiwanese single malt was named the Best Other single malt whiskey. Power's John's Lane 12-year-old was named the Best Irish single pot still whiskey, and Balcones Texas Single Malt was named the Best Craft Distiller Whiskey. We've posted a link to the complete list of winners and medal recipients in our show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. In other news, West Virginia's Smooth Ambler Distillery is coming out with a first. Big Level Wheated Bourbon is the first mainstream release to use the distillery's own whiskey exclusively. Smooth Ambler has released limited amounts of its own whiskey before under the Yearling label and a small amount in West Virginia, along with blending it into the Contradiction whiskey. But John Foster and the rest of the team have been waiting a long time for this one.
We're really excited to finally sort of have, we have a lot of babies around here, but that's kind of our baby, our sort of flagship mash bill, finally of proper age, and it certainly will get older, and I imagine there'll be some older releases of it as we mature, but this is sort of meant to be the meat and potatoes whiskey that we've always made here, so we're really excited to finally get it in a bottle.
And this does not mean that you guys are giving up the sourced spirits that you've been known to work with over the years, and the married spirits that you guys have been marrying your own spirit with those sourced spirits. This is really the third leg of that tripod, right?
That's exactly right, and that's that's kind of the master plan, is to, as we move forward, always exist with those sort of three families and play in all three and have lots of fun in all three. When Old Scout came into existence, we had always said that it wasn't really just a crutch to get us along until our own whiskey was ready. It was something we were really embracing and hoping to sustain. And so that continues. Lord knows the homemade stuff continues. I mean, we just finished an expansion to where we'll put back 3,000 barrels of whiskey this year. And then the contradiction, which, as you mentioned, is sort of the marry of the make merchant marry idea, a blend of homemade stuff with source stuff, that will continue as well.
Where's this going to be available, when, and for how much?
Well, so I said it's in 23 markets. We've posted that online. I can recite them if you like. But they're all of the major, I think, whiskey markets in the U.S. and places that we've historically sold. And the retail on it, the target retail, is $55.
Not bad.
It's 100. It's 100 proof, and it's a blend of 5 and 6 year. So it's a full year plus older than that, as I said, that first expression that we had here in West Virginia.
Big Level will be available soon in 23 U.S. states with a recommended retail price of $55 a bottle. Meanwhile, Hodeling & Company, previously known as Anchor Distilling, is reviving another name from San Francisco's whiskey heritage. J.H. Cutter Whiskey blends sourced 3.5-year-old bourbon from the folks at Kentucky Bourbon Distillers in Bardstown, with two versions of Hodeling's own Old Potrero rye, both the regular rye and the port-finished version. It'll sell for around $50 a bottle. And with the royal wedding coming up this weekend, Chivas Brothers has created a special edition of its Royal Salute blended whiskey. Only 70 decanters will be available. The price, $10,000 each. Of course, the big event this weekend is qualifying for next Sunday's Indianapolis 500. We can't get through the month of May without at least one racing-related story. England's Jay Howard will be attempting to qualify for the 102nd running of the world's greatest race, and he'll have 500 fans with a special reason to cheer him on, because their names are on his car. One of Jay's sponsors at Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports is Mark McAllister, the owner of Big Red Liquors. It's Indiana's largest chain of liquor stores. And full disclosure, one of Mark's stores in Bloomington was the very first liquor store that I ever went into when I turned 21. Now, Big Red is putting the names of 500 customers inside its logo on car number 7 for the race. I talked with Jay and Big Red's Matt Colglazier as practice for the 500 got underway this week. How'd this all work out?
Pretty much thanks to my wife, Courtney. It's how I met Mark. Courtney and Mark work closely together with Jim Beam and all the different Beam brands and obviously Mark's locations. I think 58 of them now that he has. It's pretty impressive. So obviously met him a long time ago when I met my wife. Forgive me, I forget exactly how many years ago that was now. But it's been a very long time, and we've been to lots of events together, and just, we just get along well, and just developed friendship over time. And yeah, Mark's been a really big supporter of mine and has constantly tried to assist however he can, and help him with a racing program. Believes in it and wants to be involved, and it's like an extended family. So it's been really nice having his support, and can't thank him enough for being involved again this year.
Matt, how did you guys come up with the idea to put 500 plus names of your customers on the car?
Well, I think the idea started several years ago when we had the opportunity to scoop up some independently bottled bourbon of MGP 8-year-old, and we were noodling around the idea of what we wanted to put on the label and did we want to call it anything. And I said, no, let's just call it VIP whiskey and stick everybody's name on the label. I'm pretty sure we could get the cola to go through, and it did. And people just absolutely loved it. I mean, it was total novelty, but I think for folks who buy and appreciate whiskey, they love seeing their name. And this year, when I was sort of in preliminary conversation with Courtney and everybody on what we wanted to do, and knowing that we were going to do a sponsorship for Jay, thought, well, if we're going to stick our logo on the car, why don't we try it again? People who grow up in Indianapolis around the race, big race fans, a lot of our same customers. I think the same novelty and pride applies to having your name on a race car. So even though it's, you got to be pretty up close to see the name, it's there, and that's what's important. And, hopefully grow some of Jay's fan base as well, and just kind of connect all the dots here in the month of May, which, as you know, Mark, can be a really fun month.
Oh, yeah. And you're going to have all these customers at your store in Greenwood on the south side of Indianapolis next week, right?
Yep. Next week on Monday, we're going to have a meet and greet with Jay, and we've got some glossy posters of the logo so they can find their name, and Jay will sign that for folks, and just a chance to kind of meet him and see how things are shaping up for the race this year. And just a fun time to kind of gather together and get to meet a driver, which I think is pretty cool. Anybody who's been in a two-seater or even gone to the race can appreciate what these guys do. It's pretty impressive.
Jay, tell me about the partnership that you have this year with Schmidt-Peterson and the One Cure program. It's the same program you had last year, right?
Yeah, very similar. Well, last year everything was kind of ran through the Tony Stewart Foundation, but this year it's the One Cure car. Last year we had multiple partners, but we really are making a big push to promote the One Cure initiative out of CSU. It's just an amazing program. I mean, the people at CSU are phenomenal. The work they are doing, no one knows, without being behind the scene and seeing the teamwork and the effort and the research and development and everything that goes into the cancer research that they're doing. It's just mind-blowing when you go there and get to experience it firsthand. The One Cure folks are curing cancer in pets. Animals, dogs in particular, are of interest because a lot of the cancers in dogs are exactly the same as they are in humans. And so, clinical trials in an animal, and again, I use a dog as an example, 1 to 3 years. Clinical trial in a human can be 5 to, over 10 years. And so the rate at which the One Cure folks learn and develop drugs and develop the cure is far, far quicker than on the human side of things. And so really starting to see things transition across, and they call that comparative oncology, and it's just amazing. And the saying is the cure to cancer could be walking right beside you, and it's so true. And they deserve all the credit in the world for what they're doing, and we just want to promote what they're doing and get people involved and encourage people to go to onecure.com and go check it out.
The One Cure program is based at Colorado State University, and we've included a link to the program in our show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. By the way, Jay's car will not be the only one with a whiskey connection in this year's race. Crown Royal has signed on as an associate sponsor for 2016 500 winner Alexander Rossi's car. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul. If you haven't tried Highland Park's 17-year-old The Dark single malt, well, get your hands on some while you still can. The Dark was named the best single malt Scotch whiskey 13 to 19 years old in the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, and look for its counterpart, the Light, at a whiskey shop near you. Find out more at highlandparkwhiskey.com. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. The Campbellton Malts Festival is coming up next week, the 23rd through the 25th in Campbellton, Scotland. And the Islay Festival of Malt and Music runs from the 25th through June 2nd all over Islay. Whisky Live Canberra is May 25th and 26th in Australia's capital city. The Kensington Wine Market is hosting an Ardbeg tasting and dinner with Brendan McCarran of Ardbeg in Calgary, Alberta on May 29th. And speaking of Ardbeg, there are more than 100 Ardbeg Day events around the world over the next couple of weeks, starting on May 31st in Detroit and ending on June 9th in several cities. Jura has its annual Tastival at the distillery in Craighouse, Scotland on the Isle of Jura, May 31st. Whisky Live Louisville is on June 2nd, and the Kentucky Bourbon Affair is June 5th through the 10th in Louisville. Right now, we have 308 different events on the searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. If you have a tasting, festival, or any other whiskey-related event coming up, just use the contact form on our website and let us know all about it.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
Coming up later on our new Behind the Label segment, why do so many people complain about ice in whiskey? And just what does ice do to your dram? Right now, though, WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin. Last time around, we looked at the latest investment in Scotch whisky tourism, Diageo's $203 million project to upgrade its 12 distillery visitors centers in Scotland and build a new Johnnie Walker brand home in Edinburgh. 30 years ago this month, Scotch whisky tourism was in its infancy when the Scotch Whisky Experience opened at the top of the Royal Mile near Edinburgh Castle. Since then, it's become a key stop for tourists who might not make it to visit a distillery in person, and it plays a major role in the larger Scottish tourism industry. May is the start of a year-long 30th anniversary celebration at the Scotch Whisky Experience. Julie Trevisan Hunter has been around for most of those 30 years and joined me on the phone this week. Let's talk about the 30th anniversary of the experience. What do you have planned for this month?
Well, the first thing that we decided to do was look at an exclusive bottling, which obviously we needed a good bit of planning to get some whiskies together with a minimum age of 30 years old for creating the blend. So last year we began working with William Grant and their master blender team. So together with them we've created an exclusive 30-year-old bottling, which we launched earlier in the year. And then the month of May is the month that we opened back in 1988. So that's the month that we're centering around our celebrations that will then continue for the rest of the year. So within May itself, we're doing obviously the usual bits and pieces on social. We've created some really lovely videos together with all our shareholders and stakeholders in the industry. We've also reconnected with many of our alumni, people that worked for Scotch Whisky Experience over the last 3 decades that we've been here, and that now have roles all over the world working in Scotch whisky. So we've reconnected with them and put together some videos of some of their wishes and the news of what they're doing nowadays. And then we've got some nice public-facing activity, promotions and competitions, surprising people with, small gifts like a lovely engraved Glencairn tasting glass for our visitors that come in first thing in the morning, or some mornings we're doing an extra special free coffee down in Amber Restaurant. Other days we're giving people a distillery map to encourage them to explore the rest of Scotland and go and see some of the distilleries. So lots of bits and pieces, and a nice start to the celebrations for the beginning of our 30th year.
What else will you be doing throughout the coming year?
So we're really making the most of the fact that over those 30 years, we've established so many wonderful relationships, not only with the whisky distillers who we represent, but also with the tourism industry as well. So we've got lots of competitions that we're putting out over our social channels, where we're working up some fantastic prizes to go and visit the distilleries, enjoy the distillery visitor centres, discover a little bit more about some of the maybe more unusual, unique and VIP tour experiences that they undertake. But additionally, with the travel trade and tourism side in Scotland, we're working on establishing some new partnerships as well. So for June, we'll be doing some work with the film festival, coming up with some new packages with them and promotions and competitions. We'll also be working with the International Festival, Doors Open Day, Scotland's History Festival. So all these lovely partnerships and the people that we engage with on a business-to-business level throughout the year, we'll be looking to see how we can connect and find some common ground and come up with either some special events or at the very least some competitions and promotions and things too.
How has the museum and the experience changed over the years? I know you went through a major revamp a few years ago, but how has the whole experience changed?
Gosh, in so many different ways. I've been with the Scotch Whisky Experience for a mere 22 years. And in that time there, most of it, I would say, is entirely unrecognisable than when I first walked through the doors. When we first opened in 1988, we had a guided tour around the building and a whisky shop, and that was all. And that seemed like it was plenty. And as the years have gone by, we've diversified. We opened a specialist whisky bar, which was maybe obvious, but we didn't have that right at the beginning. Adjacent to that, Amber Restaurant as well, which obviously has a wonderful name for itself now over the years that it's been open. Our top floor has our private reception facilities, and so receptions, events, conferences, whisky tastings, then using that expertise that we have in-house for whisky training as well. So we run our full-day whisky training school at least once a month, and then sometimes for bespoke events as well. And it's an exciting year in our 30th year because we're expanding yet further into the last parts of the building and the site of what used to be Castle Hill School, which is the building that we occupy. So we're currently working on an area that used to just be storage in our lowest area below Amber Restaurant, and an adjacent property, which was actually the janitor's house for the old school, which is going to house the VIP suite. So we're going to have more tasting facilities, more dining facilities, and a lovely small VIP suite for private groups as well. So lots of changes as the years have gone by.
How has the attendance changed over the years? I can imagine in 1988 there weren't that many people coming through for a Scotch whisky tour compared to today.
So when we very first opened, we had about 70,000 visitors through the doors. I'm bearing in mind, obviously, that we're in sort of a historic Victorian building. We can't just push the walls out in every direction should we wish to. But now the people coming in are customers. We don't measure footfall because we don't think it's a very accurate measurement. So footfall will be much higher. But in terms of customers, we're just under 400,000 visitors a year now. So a huge increase and a much more mixed audience than we maybe had previously. So throughout the years, about 80% of our audience has been international, so that's something that hasn't changed, the makeup of having such a big international audience. But two things have changed. One is the demographics in the country those people come from. So we now see visitors from literally, every corner of the earth. Many more visitors from South America than we used to see, and of course a huge number of visitors now from China, which is a market that's developed just in recent years. As far as tourism in Scotland is concerned. But the other change is in terms of people's knowledge and interest and passion about Scotch whisky. And when we opened in 1988, really there was very few people that were coming through our doors that knew very much about Scotch, whereas now we have a lovely mix of many people that are still at the beginning of their journey to discover what Scotch whisky is and develop a passion for it, but also with some of the other products that we've developed, like our training school, our master classes. We have people that really love Scotch and are passionate and are coming on a bit of a pilgrimage to Scotland. And of course, May is a wonderful month for us to see those people, because they might be here for the Spirit of Speyside Festival at the beginning of the month, or for the Isla Festival at the end, and then coming to visit us sometime before or after one of those.
Tell me how this has really affected Scotch whisky tourism over the years, because the experience was around before a lot of the distilleries themselves were open to visitors. And you really have been at the forefront of Scotch whisky tourism.
Well, I think one of the wonderful things is the fact that we're so connected with the whisky industry. So a number of years ago, Susan Morrison, our Director and General Manager, set up a pre- and post-season meeting and get-together of all the managers of the distillery visitor centres. So not the managers of the distilleries producing the spirit, not the brand managers, not the directors, but the people that are actually responsible for the tourism side of the distilleries themselves. And of course that brought together people that maybe ordinarily wouldn't normally connect and be able to share expertise and knowledge, share an idea of how their season was going, some things that were working. And importantly from us, and I like to think that we've maybe imparted quite a bit over the years, is because many of the distilleries are obviously in very rural locations, and if we've got developing new markets and new trends, they maybe appear in London first, and then they kind of come up and we see them in Edinburgh, and then after a few years they make their way further afield into those sort of more rural places. So a lot of the initial trends that we've seen, or market demographics that have changed, we've seen them here at Scotch Whisky Experience quite a long while before the distilleries, which are a little bit more remote. So we've been able to share some of our knowledge and expertise, experience and contacts in that remit as well. And also a nice way of just ensuring that the whole distillery visitor centre sector can begin raising the quality and raising the profile of what we do collectively.
Has there been any thought of expanding outside of the Royal Mile to take some of the experience to other parts of Scotland and make it available countrywide?
Yeah, I mean, say never. We've obviously over the years, looked at what we do in our site here, and especially nowadays that we're at certain times of the year pretty much at full capacity, which is a fantastic problem to have. But no, as yet, we're just firmly fixed on our one spot right next to Edinburgh Castle.
So has that 30-year-old blend sold out yet?
It hasn't. No, I checked on the numbers actually earlier on, and we do still have plenty of it in stock. So it's only been released quite recently, and we've been using it carefully. So we didn't want it to be sold out too quickly, so we could use it in some of our promotions and our tastings and that kind of thing. So we've been quite cautious about how much we've put on sale, but as a result, yes, we're still okay with stocks. It's still available.
By the way, the price for that 30th anniversary blend is £195 a bottle. That's about $264 at current exchange rates. The experience also offers free tastings in its whiskey shop. The next one is coming up May 31st and will feature Shivers Brothers whiskies. There's a link for the Scotch Whisky Experience in our show notes at whiskycast.com, and that is WhiskyCast In-Depth. Brought to you by Lagavulin, the legendary Islay single malt. Look for the classic 16-year-old, the Distiller's Edition, and the new 8-year-old Lagavulin at a whiskey shop near you. Find out more at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Let's start off with a single malt I mentioned last time around in the news, the 2008 Crofton J single cask that was bottled by Loch Lomond Distillery for the Whiskey Exchange. I received a sample the other day, and Crofton J is the heavily peated single malt that Loch Lomond distills primarily for use in its blends. It's rarely available as a single malt. This cask was a refill American oak hogshead, matured for just a couple of months short of 10 years, and it's bottled at 54.8% ABV. The nose is earthy with peat smoke, peat moss, and garden soil, along with dark chocolate, hints of dried fruits, and what I can best describe as the aroma of fresh roofing tar on a hot summer's day. The taste has peat smoke and creosote, along with licorice, dark chocolate, and oak tannins. The smokiness fades to reveal sweeter notes of chocolate mint leaves, hints of citrus, and heather. The finish has campfire smoke, salted caramel, oak, and a grilled pineapple tartness. It's very long and warming. I'm scoring the Crofton J 2008 single cask a 93. And if anyone from Loch Lomond Distillers is listening, how's about bottling this one more often? Just like the Scots, the English do not use an E in whiskey, but the English Whiskey Company does use an E in Smoky. The Smoky is its peated single malt, and it's bottled at 43% ABV. The nose has a light, subtle peatiness, along with vanilla, straw, pears, and just a hint of anise. The taste starts off creamy and fruity at first, then the smoke comes alive along with touches of white pepper and allspice. The finish is long and smoky with gentle spices, and I'm scoring the Smoky from the English Whiskey Company a 90. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, where they're making room in the trophy case after the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Best bourbon, Henry McKenna Single Barrel. Best small batch bourbon, Elijah Craig Small Batch. Just more proof of Heaven Hill's pedigree for making whiskeys with award-winning flavor. Meet the family at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. Next up, let's look at a blended scotch that you might just overlook because you haven't heard much about it. The Lauder's 15-year-old from Macduff International. This blend is matured in both ex-bourbon and sherry casks. The nose is subtle and complex, with tropical notes of mango, papaya, and orange peel, along with subtle hints of oak and vanilla. The taste is fruity with Christmas cake, soft spices, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and gentle, with soft fruits and just a hint of spice. It's a nice, complex blend, and I'm scoring the Lauder's 15-year-old a 91. And finally, the Grand McNish 6-cask edition from the Macduff stable is a blended malt. It uses malt whiskies from each of Scotland's 6 whiskey regions and is bottled at 40% ABV. The nose is fruity and floral with just a touch of smoke, heather, and oak. The taste has salted caramel, toffee, and vanilla notes, with a kiss of smoke and a hint of citrus in the background, while the finish is long and well-rounded, with gentle spiciness and just a hint of fruits. Don't overlook this one. I'm scoring the Grand McNish 6-cask edition a 92. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I've added these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 2,200 different whiskeys at WhiskyCast.com.
This is whiskey. Johnny Walker's Scotch Whisky. From this place, and these places in that place. These are the people that make it. Aging in oak for 12 long years. See, the land that shapes these people and the people that shape this whiskey all shape how bloody good it tastes. Bold as it is complex. For every step you take, this is Johnny Walker Black Label, friends. Step right up. Can I drink this now?
Johnny Walker Black Label Blended Scotch Whisky. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Let's open up the inbox now for this week's Your Voice, brought to you by Lot 40. Last time around, I mentioned a good friend of WhiskyCast, Tom Helt, and his battle with cancer, along with the word from his wife, Barb, that he's been moved to hospice care. I wanted to share with you, and especially with Tom and his family, some of the responses we've received since then. From John Miller, Tom is a most generous and welcoming friend, whether you are a new, like me, or long-standing acquaintance. He is in my thoughts and prayers, as I hope that we yet might still share a dram or two in the future. Best wishes to him and all of his family. I met Tom 6 years ago when he was part of our WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast at Christopher Winters' house in Zionsville, Indiana. And Christopher writes, "Thanks for posting this, Mark. Tom is a true gentleman. I never made it to his house. I think he called his whiskey room the bunker. We're pulling for you, Tom." From Jeff Teamy, "Tom is a true friend and mentor. He taught me so much about whiskey over the years. His house parties were legendary. Sharing some exclusive drams with him around the table will be a memory I'll always cherish." And Dennis Lynch added this, "Thanks for sharing this, Mark. Tom has touched the lives of so many folks over the years, myself included. You are in our thoughts and prayers, Tom, Barb, and family." Tom and Barb, I'll second all of those thoughts. Hang in there. On that note, just as we began recording this episode, we got word from Ireland that John Ryan, a longtime figure at Powers Irish Whiskey and Irish Distillers, has passed away this week. He was one of the last members of the Power family to work in the whiskey business. I'll have more on this next time around, but our thoughts and prayers are with his family as well. W. Brendan Waller tweeted a question from Canada this week. "Any insight or idea of where to get stats on consumption of whiskey? I'm trying to get a sense of what percentage whiskey sales made up in 2017 in Ontario. Welcome your thoughts." Well, I don't have those numbers handy, but I know who does. I forwarded his question on to both Spirits Canada and the LCBO. While Ontario's Provincial Liquor Board never responded, Spirits Canada got back to us within an hour. Whiskey sales accounted for 34% of all spirits sold in Ontario last year. Thanks to Jan Westcott and his team for answering Brendan's question. If you have a question, a suggestion, or something else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always post it on the Your Voice page at whiskycast.com. Or you can do like Brendan did and reach us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is brought to you by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's wrap things up now with Behind the Label, our inside look at some of the science, history, and other stuff that makes whiskey unique. If you want to start an argument at a whiskey tasting, just bring out a bucket full of ice. Some people do like an ice cube or two in their whiskey, while others cringe at the thought. Usually, I'm in that latter camp, but I have been known to put an ice cube or two in the glass when I'm relaxing with a dram, especially if it's a hot day. You see, ice tends to close up the aroma and flavor notes in a whiskey. Cold water can do the same thing. That's because aroma and flavor are directly related to temperature. Want an example? Compare the taste and smell of a hot slice of pizza to a cold one. Temperature releases the molecules in food and drinks and other stuff that directly affect our senses of taste and smell. So when I'm evaluating a whiskey for our tasting notes here on the website, I want to smell and taste it at room temperature. For that reason, depending on the weather, I'll let those samples that the Whiskey Fairy delivers sit for a day or two before I open them, just to let them get to room temperature after being in a really hot or, in the wintertime, a really cold truck. And it's the same reason why I do not use ice when I'm working with a whiskey. Richard Patterson of White & Mackay points out the other reason at his tastings. Ice can often pick up the aromas of any other food that's in the freezer or even the refrigerator next to the freezer. Things like fish or garlic, for instance. And that can throw off a critical evaluation as well. That said, if you're relaxing with a glass of whiskey and you want to throw in a couple of cubes of ice, go right ahead. But if you're at a bar and you don't want ice in your glass, don't be afraid to tell the bartender you want it neat. And raise hell if they try to charge you more for the privilege. Some bars have been known to do just that. That's Behind the Label, and if you have something you'd like us to dig into for an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. That's also where you'll find links for WhiskyCast HD videos and our WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, along with the latest news, events, cocktail recipes, and much more, including a complete archive of all of our past episodes. You'll also find us online at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
WhiskyCast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
This is Whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch whisky, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2018, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.